is KIC Radio.
Hello, and welcome back to the South Bank podcast. Wow.
May I?
Go ahead.
It just seems the circus that is Wolverhampton Wanderers just keeps on performing, eh? Just when you think it can't get any worse. I was actually quite looking forward to doing this week's podcast, Jacob. I don't know about you, but when I heard Vitor Pereira obviously had been sacked, I was somewhat jubilant. Obviously, while we all know the bigger issues are upstairs, as really proving the point in the news today, I thought it could be the dawn of at least some optimism for a small period of time. Getting a new gaffer in, a new system, someone finally uplifting this really mentally battered group of players, really. And I was just so disappointed. See the news that we're all seeing today. I wrote a list of managerial candidates I thought would be good to speculate if they got the job, or some wild cards and such. I'm sure we'll still get into that, Jacob, but would you care to share the thrilling news for all Wolves fans?
Well,
Sarcasm in my tone.
they say you should never go back to an ex, but it seems like we just couldn't help ourselves, because as the time of recording, it seems set. Wolves are in advanced talks with Gary O'Neil to become the next manager of Wolverhampton Wanderers.
No.
Fantastic news if you're a fan of West Bromwich Albion, a fan of Birmingham City, a fan of Aston Villa, but not so good if you're a fan of Wolverhampton Wanderers, Cameron. Wow. When I first saw this, when I first heard the Gary O'Neil shout, it was like, I thought, yeah, this is Twitter, trolls. And then David Ornstein starts reporting it. Ben Jacobs starts reporting it. And suddenly it's gone from a consideration to advanced talks. And I'm thinking, at what point am I going to wake up?
God.
What point is this weird nightmare going to be over? But how on earth has Jeff Shee and Fosun allowed the club to get to this point, Cameron?
I thought my nightmares were last night, but it appears I've woken up inside of them. I'm really so confused as to why you would decide to sack Vitor Pereira after a winless opening 10 games, not having a league win since April. So what do you decide to do in this situation? Do you, A, look for a Prem-proven manager, someone like Brendan Rodgers, for example, who at least gets point in this league? B, go for an appointment who can help build next season in the event of a relegation, someone like a Michael Carrick? Or C, you go back to your ex, you appoint the only man who got even worse form and even worse points per game with a better squad last year, and get rid of Vitor Pereira with the man you replaced him with in Gary O'Neil. Why on earth have Fosun thought this is a good idea, except purely for the fact that Jeff Shee doesn't want to pay off the rest of Gary O'Neil's contract, which he's still paying because he sacked him later than this time last year? What on earth is going on? Like, who is making these decisions? And you can't even blame it on the staff that were apparently liked Gary O'Neil at the time, because they've all gone and left. We've got a new sporting director, and this is what they decide to do.
Honestly, this has been one of the weirdest and potentially one of the worst weekends I've had supporting Wolverhampton Wanderers. It started with a trip down to Craven Cottage on Saturday to watch whatever that was put out. Andre and Gomez being dropped, I think, was the final nail in the coffin for Vitor. I think that was almost a sack me now plea from the manager. But yeah, and then to top it off, Vitor being sacked, obviously a bit of good news. But what the hell are we doing in this situation? How do we... I'm going to read out when Vitor was originally sacked. These were the bookies' favourites. And spoiler alert, Gary O'Neil's not on here because of how ludicrous of a decision that would have been. Okay, the bookies' favourites at the time were Brendan Rodgers, 2-1. A much better appointment with Gary O'Neil. Sergio Conceição, 6-1. I don't know why it was that high. Seems just signed a new deal with Al Ittihad in Saudi Arabia, but would have probably been the best choice out of the names on this list. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, 6-1. Much better option than Gary O'Neill. Played the system, did quite well at Manchester United until it went sour in the end.
And he's a motivational coach.
Yeah,
as well.
Kevin Muscat. Okay, maybe pushing the boat out a bit there. Eric Ten Hag, would he come to Wolves? Probably not, but a much better option than Gary O'Neill. Apparently, he's among the considerations, according to Ornstein, but nowhere near in advanced talks like we are with Gary O'Neill to come back to Wolves. Bearing in mind that man was hounded out of the club less than 12 months ago. Frank Lampard, who, whilst on the topic of Frank Lampard, Southampton are looking at. They're looking at probably a better manager than we are. And speaking of Southampton, Gary O'Neill's their third choice is being reported after Frank Lampard and Mark Robbins. They're 21st in the Championship, and their third choice is our first choice to come in. And then the rest of the names, Steven Gerrard, no. Russell Martin, no. Mark Robbins, possibly. But my life, Cameron, can you get your head around this? Because I'm at such a loss. I'm waiting for all this to come out and the journalists just say, sorry, lads, we were having a laugh. Because what on earth is going on?
I keep pinching myself, Jacob. I really just want to wake up right about now. It didn't feel too real as I've not really left the house yet today. But now I'm sat here talking to you about it and talking to our listeners about it. It suddenly feels all too real. Here I am with my list of managerial candidates. Even Robbie Keane, managing out in Hungary, has put his name forward for the Wolves vacancy. And I would rather take him than Gary O'Neill, because at least he'd bring some kind of feel-good reunion factor to it. Obviously, having come through the club. What on earth? Like, I cannot fathom the decisions. For our YouTube listeners, you can probably see my crazy hand gestures because I'm absolutely livid. I do not understand this at all. I've compiled some stats which are shared between their tenures, actually. So, fewest points after 10 Premier League games. All teams up to 8th were relegated. As of this season, Wolves are 4th in that list. So, you can assume that we'll go down too. Wolves are the only side in the top 7 tiers without a win. That's 251 teams. And then, obviously, winless in their last 10. Gary O'Neill and Vitor Pereira. Who's both thrown the fans under the bus before they were sacked? Gary O'Neill and Vitor Pereira. Who had a better squad? Gary O'Neill. I'm lost for words. I'm actually this close to just, if they announce that appointment, I might genuinely just boycott the rest of the season and not go.
Yeah, I would not blame you.
I really think we need to take matters into our own hands as fans, if I'm honest, if this goes through.
What I can't understand is Fosun obviously deem our start to the season without winning 10 unacceptable, hence why they've sacked Vitor Pereira. We went winless in our first 10 last year under Gary O'Neill, and we're going back to him. So how can you say that this is unacceptable and then proceed to replace him with someone that did the exact same thing? But it's come out in the last hour that obviously, of course, at the time of recording this, Gary O'Neill has not been appointed by Wolves. It just looks extremely likely in advanced talks. It's come out in the last hour. Wolves are speaking to at least one manager from the Mendes stable in their search for a new manager. I mean, knowing Fosun, it's probably Bruno Lage. So,
yeah.
Whether that's something that could be better or worse, I don't know. Cameron?
Can't wait for the next 24 hours when it turns out the top 3 candidates for the job are Gary O'Neill, Lopetegui and Bruno Lage.
Lopetegui wouldn't leave Qatar in a minute to join this mess. He's going to the World Cup. He's having a great time. But I can't get my head around what on earth is going on here, Cameron. I think the players surely don't want to invite Gary O'Neill back into the dressing room, ones that were there last year as well.
You see, that was my thinking, because he completely lost the dressing room, and that was one of the main reasons he was sacked. These players are not exactly going to be eager to work under him. They're not going to have forgotten all the broken promises that Gary O'Neill left them in regards to game time. they're not going to forget. Why would you? And when you're already mentally slumped, you're hardly going to feel uplifted by that appointment. And I think it's ludicrous. I'd expect genuinely like so many transfer requests handed in upon his appointment by the better members of the squad, or at least members of the squad who don't deserve to be playing under Gary O'Neil, which is honestly most of them. I'm really, just when you think it can't get any worse, it somehow does.
Well, Cameron, I'm going to tell you something that's going to make your day worse now. This just flew from a source, Graham Bailey, basically saying O'Neill's a done deal. And this has been met with a bit of saying it's not the most reliable. Some people saying I've got sources to here, you also have sources to them. But at the same point, this is reports that I'm not enjoying seeing, Cameron. And I mean, let's take a bit of a spin on this. Is there maybe a slight sense that Gary O'Neil knows the club? He won't have to have that settling in period if we're trying to look at this somewhat positively.
No.
No,
I don't think there's any way you can look at this positive. You say that as an excuse. I can understand you're trying to look for some optimism here, Jacob, but can you really say he knows the club too well when he was only here less than a year?
I suppose so, yeah. It's just honestly such a mess, and I think I'm gonna have to title this a rant rather than a podcast because I don't think this hasn't had our usual formula to it. But I couldn't sit down and act normal, act like everything's dandy, and talk about the football with what's gone on in the past 24 hours. I think it would be impossible, in all honesty. I think, look, the thoughts on the way home from Craven Cottage on Saturday was, look, we're down, we're relegated. And you mentioned earlier, whilst as fans might think that, the board can't be thinking that. You can't be settling for a manager like Gary O'Neil. You know, I've heard Rob Edwards' name been put in the hat, but I think he's got a better project at Middlesbrough.
Oh, I wouldn't want to leave that for us.
They're probably more likely to be playing Premier League football next year than we are.
Yeah.
So, I don't think he'd leave that at all, despite being a Wolves boy. Michael Carrick, I saw your shout of. I wouldn't mind that.
I'd rather see that.
Yeah, at least if we go down, he's got a system that could succeed in the Championship. I know he didn't take Middlesbrough up, but he came very close and kept them very stable for a good amount of time.
He's someone who can at least build a project in the second tier. And I have a horrible feeling that that's what Fosun would trust Gary O'Neil to do. And while I think not only, like you say, it's too early to throw in the towel when we're 10 games in from the point of the ownership, or at least it should be, the fact that they'd appoint Gary O'Neil is absolutely ludicrous. And I hate to say it, I think he'd keep his job if we went down. And I can see us going all the way back down to League One again if that's the case, because he's just such an appalling manager.
Well, what worries me, Cameron, is I was watching Wrexham against Coventry on Friday night, and Wrexham haven't set the world alight in the Championship. They're not doing bad, but they're not doing great either. And they played better football than us on that night. They passed and moved the ball way better than we did. They beat Coventry, who were top of the league, and I thought if they came and played that at Molineux, they'd beat us. They 100% would have put us to the sword that day, and that's what worries me. We don't look like a good Championship side at the minute. And It's not going to take Gary O'Neil to fix that. I mean, when you look at Gary O'Neil, I think, look at the managers that have been sacked already in the Premier League. He's not a better manager than what we've got rid of, I don't think. He's not a better manager than Graham Potter, probably, I don't think. They're probably about the same level. Even Ange Postecoglou has been sacked from Forest. He's probably a better manager than Gary O'Neil.
They're both far better. Yeah. I think they'd be offended to hear themselves compared to Gary O'Neil, if I'm honest.
By no means am I saying that they're the appointments we should make, but I'd rather see them holding up the Wolves shirt than Gary O'Neil, 100%. I mean, I think I'd rather get Willie Kenny Jacket back. If we're going to play silly ball, we might as well.
I genuinely rather have a caretaker manager the rest of the season than appoint Gary O'Neil.
I'm at a loss for words, honestly.
I know that's insane to say, but I genuinely would rather have a caretaker manager than have to look at Mr. iPad and tea sipper in the dugout again. What I also don't understand about this appointment is that he would have his back against the wall from day one.
Yeah.
The fans haven't forgiven him for his last tenure. The fans are sick of seeing him on Monday Night Football talking about us enough, and yet here he is walking back into the vacancy, and I just cannot. I do not get who approved this. Like,
he's got to hit the ground running when he comes in if he wants any chance of surviving. But look at the games he's going to come into as well: Chelsea, Crystal Palace, Arsenal, Villa. I don't see a point we get off there.
No,
with any manager, never mind Guy O'Neill. I don't think Pep Guardiola gets this team a point at one of them games. This is absolutely ludicrous, and this must be.
I just want the season to end now.
This must be comedy gold for rival fans right now. It's embarrassing, honestly. I'm at such a loss for words, and it's not often that happens. But with
me neither.
With every hour, it gets more bizarre.
It feels like purgatory, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
How often have we been sat lost for words on this podcast?
Not very often. I apologise to our listeners that this hasn't been the usual format, but I can't function with this.
My head's in a blender, I have to say. I honestly, sorry for all you listeners today, because this is just... It's probably exactly how the inside of your heads are. So we're probably only furthering the symptoms of Wolverhampton Wanderers, but...
So anyway, we'll move on to this weekend and away trip to Chelsea. Who Chelsea, of course, won against Spurs on Saturday.
Oh my God. All I'm going to say is I put João Pedro as my FPL captain going into this week. I'm really tempted to triple captain him.
Yeah,
I just can't believe it. I'm at a loss for words. I don't even know what our lineup would be, if I'm honest. And the only positive is that Agbadu's suspended. By the way, that sending off, what on earth was he thinking? Like, I understand many Wolves fans are livid about the red card being gifted at all. I think watching it on TV it was, but obviously it shouldn't have been because of the handball. But I don't think that excuses him deciding to put in that challenge at all.
He's clumsy, and I mean that just sums up. Yeah,
but we can't just keep saying that. Like that just shows how bad he is. What is this fall off?
It's ridiculous. Man. But the only ray of positivity I'm going to say is I remember a few years ago we went to Chelsea without a manager, our goalkeeper coach Clover, and we came with a 2-2 draw somehow. I'm not saying we're going to do that on Saturday.
The Connor Cody goal.
The law of averages, Chiquinho masterclass.
But we don't have Chiquinho.
No, nor do we have Connor Cody. But we have James Collins probably in the dugout if it's not Gary O'Neill. So
I'd rather that.
Between the two former West Ham players, one of them's going to be in the dugout. But yeah, I don't think there's much more to say. I don't have anything else to say.
Well, all the notes I wrote for the podcast this week, Jacob, were about speculation on who I think should be the manager and our reasoning as to why. And I haven't been able to use any of it because the club have now decided to go back to their ex. I was thinking of even, obviously, you've mentioned Michael Carrick. I was thinking even as a wild card, Gennaro Gattuso, due to just being a Mendes client, and I thought that's someone they could try and explore. Obviously, we've been rejected by Ruben Borges, the sporting coach. Probably had to use about 0.5 of a brain cell to consider doing that.
It came out quite quickly that he rejected us.
Yeah. Eric Ten Hag, obviously, I don't think he'd want to come to us, but I'd rather that than Gary O'Neill. I just cannot fathom the decisions that folks are making. I think it's important to address, but I really think we actually, as a fan base, have to start taking matters into our own hands and really like making our voices heard against this ownership now, because I think otherwise these next 4 or 5 years in the Championship are going to be much, much worse than anything we've seen before.
I mean, just before we
and that's even if we stay in the Championship. I can see us going down twice in a row again at our current trajectory.
I mean, this is just coming out now, coming on the timeline. Southampton are reportedly looking at Brendan Rodgers as part of their ongoing search for a new manager. How are they?
You're telling me Southampton can go for a manager like that, and we're here going for Gary O'Neill.
So yeah, their candidates seem better than ours at the minute. So that just sums it up, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that's just the nail in the coffin, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's all there is to say. I think we ought to wrap this up here while we still have our sanity.
Yeah. Apologies, listeners, for this week not being the most formatted. It's been much more of a rant, and I'm sure it's been stuff that's all been said to your own friends and families. Apologise if we've drummed any of this home and made it feel a bit more real, but I hate to say it, that's because it looks like it's getting real. Wow.
Anyway, big thank you to anyone.
Score predictions.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna go 5-1. I'm gonna go 5-1.
I'm gonna go 5-0 for Chelsea.
Oh God.
But thank you to anyone that's listened this far into the podcast. Thank you once again, Cameron Gorman, for joining me.
No problem.
As per usual, hope you had a good birthday from last week. Well, this has been the South Bank podcast, and hopefully
Wolves have just been the cherry on top.
Yeah, this has been the South Bank podcast. Hopefully,
help us.
It's a bit more positive next week.
Save us.
But this is us signing off.
Goodbye.
This is KIC Radio.